The trucks came up Fifth Avenue before dawn, one behind the other, each flatbed carrying steel columns and beams that had already been chalk-marked at the mill with the exact floor and the exact position each one was going to. There was a reason for the chalk. There was nowhere on the site to put anything down. The lot was a single block in Midtown Manhattan, boxed in by traffic on every side, and the contract on it called for the tallest building in the world to be standing there in a little over a year. No beam could be stockpiled. No brick could wait. Every piece that arrived had to travel from the truck to the derrick to its place in the sky that same morning, and it had to arrive in the right order. There were no cranes standing over the block, the way a modern site would have. Each piece was raised by a derrick bolted to the frame itself, a machine that climbed the tower as it grew. Before the first column ever moved, the project had to be reduced to a sequence of movements that could be repeated without hesitation. That meant deciding not only what the building would look like when finished, but what order every piece would have to follow on its way there. A column could not simply be delivered when it was ready. It had to arrive when the crew, the derrick, the truck, and the workers above were ready for it. A delay at one point could move through the entire chain. On a site this tight, there was no spare corner where a mistake could be parked and forgotten. They had to do it while the streets around the site stayed open to traffic, while the neighbors kept the light in their windows, while the money grew tighter every week as the Depression closed in, and while a rival tower a few blocks south had already taken the title they were chasing. That rival was the Chrysler Building, which had raised a spire hidden inside its own crown to reach 1,046 feet and had become, briefly, the tallest structure ever built. The tower rising on Fifth Avenue was designed to pass it and to keep passing whatever came next. The site also had to be designed around the city that already existed. Fifth Avenue could not simply become a private construction road. Pedestrians, automobiles, shops, offices, and neighboring buildings continued their ordinary routines while the tower rose beside them. The work, therefore, had to fit into the rhythm of Manhattan rather than stopping it. Trucks arrived, unloaded, and disappeared. Materials moved upward instead of spreading outward. The higher the building climbed, the more important that discipline became, because every square foot of empty space on the ground was already claimed by something else. The Empire State Building is remembered as a race to the sky. It was really a problem in scheduling, and the height turned out to be the part that came easy. This is the story of how 102 floors of steel went up in 410 days. It is the story of a construction site run like a moving factory, where a beam rolled in a Pittsburgh mill could be riveted into the New York sky within days of leaving it. It is the story of the roughly 3,400 men who did the lifting, and whose names the record mostly failed to keep. But before any of that could be scheduled, the design had to survive a set of problems that had defeated every builder who tried to go this high. That is an easy detail to overlook when looking at the finished building. A completed skyscraper gives no visible clue about the choreography required to assemble it. The finished lobby does not show the delivery schedule. The observation deck does not show the narrow rails used to move materials. The polished stone does not show the men waiting for a hot rivet to arrive. The building appears permanent and still, but during construction, almost everything about it was temporary. The derricks, the tracks, the platforms, the work routes, and even the positions where men stood from one day to the next. The first answer was the old one. For centuries, the way to build tall was to build heavy, with load-bearing walls of stone and brick that carried the weight down to the ground. It was proven, and it was fireproof. It was also impossible here. At 100 stories, the walls at street level would have to be so thick to hold the floors above them that they would swallow the ground floors whole, and the ground floors earned the most rent, a building that ate its own most valuable. Space was not one anyone would finance. The second answer was concrete. A reinforced concrete frame would be strong, and it would resist fire better than bare steel. But concrete has to be poured in place and then left to cure, floor by floor, and curing takes days each time. The 10th floor cannot be poured until the 9th below. It is hardened enough to carry it. Multiply that weight by 100, and the schedule was gone before it began. The decision to use steel solved one problem and created several others. Steel could carry enormous loads without consuming the huge amount of floor space that masonry walls would have required, but steel also demanded precision. A column had to meet another column at exactly the intended level. A beam had to arrive where the crew expected it. Holes drilled at the mill had to line up when separate pieces met hundreds of feet above the the street. There was little opportunity to improvise once the pieces were in the air. Accuracy had to be built into the process before the material ever reached the site. The third answer kept the steel, but built it the ordinary way, with materials stacked on site and lifted by cranes standing on the ground. It was standard practice, but it needed two things this site could not give it. It needed room to stack the steel, and there was none. And it needed a crane that could reach the top when no crane on the ground could reach the 80th floor. The lifting could not stay on the ground. It had to climb with the building. The solution was to stop thinking of the site as a building plot and start running it as a production line. The steel would be cut, drilled, and fitted in the mills before it ever reached Manhattan, so that nothing had to be worked on at street level. It would be delivered just in time, scheduled almost to the hour, so a beam arrived, was hooked, and was lifted without ever touching the ground, and it would be raised by derricks bolted to the frame itself, machines that hauled the steel up a few floors, then were taken apart and rebuilt higher, leapfrogging up the tower as it grew. The production line idea therefore extended far beyond transportation. It shaped the relationship between the drawing office, the steel mill, the truck driver, the derrick operator, and the men on the frame. Each group depended on the one before it. The drawings determined the pieces determined the load determined the delivery determined the lift determined when the next crew could begin. What looked from the street like a collection of separate trades was, in practice, one connected operation. The thing that made the site impossible was the same thing that made it fast. Because there was no room to store anything, nothing was allowed to wait, and because nothing could wait, every delivery had to be timed to the moment it was needed. That timing is what let thousands of men work the same cramped block without ever standing in each other's way. The developers, John Raskob and the former governor Al Smith, had formed a company to build it and handed the job to the contractors Starrett Brothers and Eakin. The architects, Shreve, Lamb, and Harmon, drew the whole design in a matter of weeks. The speed was not simply the result of men working faster. It came from removing pauses. If a crew finished one operation and had to wait for the next material, the whole advantage disappeared. If material arrived too early, it occupied space that another crew needed. If it arrived too late, workers were left standing idle. The remarkable achievement was the narrow margin between those failures. The building moved quickly because the process around it was designed to keep moving. What they were building was a steel skeleton 102 stories tall, rising 1,250 feet from the pavement, engineered by Homer Balcom. Every ounce of the building's weight would ride on that frame. The limestone and brick that would clad it were only a skin hung on the steel, holding nothing up. The frame took around 57,000 tons of structural steel, erected by the firm of Post and McCord, and it went up at a pace never seen before, roughly 4.5 floors a week at its best. There were no tower cranes to do it. The guy derricks that lifted every column had to be dismantled and rebuilt higher by hand, again and again, all the way up. Moving material sideways was its own problem. On each new floor, the crews laid a narrow gauge railway and pushed the brick and stone along it in small hopper cars by hand, because there were no pumps or conveyors to carry material across a floor a quarter of a mile in the air. To stop the men wasting an hour climbing down for lunch, the builders put kitchens high in the tower and brought the food to them. At the heart of all of it was a single kind of connection, repeated across the frame more times than anyone kept exact count of. The steel was not welded, and it was not held by the high-strength bolts a modern crew would use. It was riveted by hand by gangs of 4, and the whole strength of the building came down to what happened to one small piece of hot metal. A rivet went into the joint, glowing red, and as it cooled, it shrank, pulling the steel plates together and locking them in tension. If a rivet was driven too cold, it would not shrink enough to clamp. If it did not clamp, the joint would work loose, and a frame 1,200 feet tall could not afford joints that worked loose in the wind. The speed of the frame depended on this repetition. The same basic sequence could be performed over and over, but every connection still had to be made correctly. There was no room for a crew to treat one joint casually because hundreds more were waiting behind it. The building was accumulating connections faster than almost any previous structure had attempted, and each one became part of the permanent load path of the tower. Drafting table covers the structures that got built and the people the record left out of them, and there is more of it every week. Those people here are the 3,400 men who were on this site at its peak, and they are where the story goes next. They came from everywhere the city drew its labor. Immigrants filled the trades, and among the men who walked the high steel were Mohawk iron workers from Kanawaki, near Montreal, who had made a name in this exact work on bridges and towers. The photographer, Louis Hine, climbed the frame with them and photographed them at it, hanging off cables, sitting on beams with the city dropping away beneath them. There was also a human limit to the system. Machines could lift the steel, but men still had to receive it, guide it, align it, secure it, and connect it. Every increase in speed placed demands on their timing. A derrick could bring a column to the right place, but the men above had to make the final connection while the piece was moving and while the structure around them was still incomplete. The efficiency of the project depended on experience that could not be reduced to a drawing or a timetable. A working day was spent on open steel with almost nothing between a man and the street far below. The riveting itself was a piece of choreography. One man, the heater, cooked the rivets in a small forge until they glowed, then threw each one through the air. A second man caught it in a metal can. A third held it in place, while a fourth drove it home with a pneumatic hammer. If the catch was missed, a piece of metal at furnace heat fell toward whoever stood below. The photographs from the period make the height look almost unreal because they freeze moments that would have been ordinary to the workers. A man sits on a beam with nothing visible around him except sky and the grid of the city below. Another stands beside a column that will soon disappear beneath the finished floors. The images are dramatic now, but for the men on the job, they were part of a working environment. They had to think about the next connection, the next lift, the next rivet, and the next safe place to stand. In winter, the wind came off the open sky, and the steel was too cold to hold with a bare hand. In summer, it burned to the touch. The official count put the number of men killed building it at 5, though the record is thin, and the true figure may be higher than the one the builders were willing to publish. The pay was good by the standards of the Depression, when men were glad of any work at all. Whether it was enough is a question the payroll cannot answer, because the payroll was written by the people who set the rates. Hine's camera kept the faces, the paperwork kept the trades. The names of most of these men were never written down anywhere we can now read. The Depression added another dimension to the project. Work was scarce across the country, and a major construction job could draw men who had few alternatives. The building therefore became both a technological project and a source of employment at a moment when employment itself was becoming difficult to find. That does not make the work less dangerous. It makes the choice to take that work easier to understand. Men accepted risks that would be difficult to imagine from a modern office or a modern construction site. At its fastest, the frame climbed 14 floors in 10 working days. Follow a single story up, and the method is plain. A derrick swings a column off the delivery truck and lifts it into the air. The gang above lands its base on the column below and drops in the pins to hold it. Bolts go in to steady it. The plumbing up gang trues it with cable and turnbuckle until it stands exactly vertical. The riveters move in behind them. The floor beams follow, then the arches, then the decking. The derrick is taken apart and rebuilt one level higher, and the next morning it begins again, one floor a day at the peak, the tower climbing out of the middle of the city in plain view of everyone in it. As the structure rose, the city itself became part of the working environment. Weather could change the conditions on the frame, wind could affect a lift, and cold could make steel difficult to handle. At ground level, the progress was visible to people moving through the streets. At the upper floors, the workers were operating in a different world, with the sounds and movement of Manhattan far below them. The tower created its own vertical workplace, one that changed every day as another floor appeared. When the frame finally topped out, there was a flag at the summit, and the executives and the press. The men who had set the last beam were mostly already gone. The steel phase was ending. Their part of the job was finished, and they were moving on to the next site, or to no site at all. The way they built it did not last. Hand riveting gave way to welding and high-strength bolts, quieter and faster and needing fewer men. The guy derricks that had to be rebuilt floor by floor were replaced by tower cranes that climb on their own. Even the height record fell to the towers of the World Trade Center a generation later. The final appearance of the building hides how much temporary work disappeared after completion. The rails were removed, the derricks were moved away, the unfinished openings were enclosed. The tracks and platforms that had made the production system possible were gone. What remained was the permanent frame and the materials attached to it. That is one reason construction history can be misleading. The evidence of the process is often removed by the very success of the process. The better the finished building looks, the easier it is to forget how unfinished and improvised the site once appeared. What survived was the method. The idea of a construction site run as a scheduled production line with parts made off-site and delivered just in time is now simply how large buildings get built. The men on Fifth Avenue proved it could be done at a scale no one had tried, and the logic of the project can still be read in the building itself. The setbacks, the repeated floors, the steel frame, and the vertical organization all reflect a structure designed to be assembled in a particular sequence. The tower was not only a destination at the end of construction, it was also a machine for construction while it was rising. Each completed level created new working positions from which the next level could be built. The building effectively carried its own workplace upward. Stand on the observation deck on the 86th floor today, and the wind will still push at you more than 1,000 feet up, with the city laid out small below. The steel under your feet is the same steel those gangs riveted into place, still holding the floor exactly where they left it, still plumb after almost a century. Every column you stand on was lifted by a machine that had to be rebuilt higher the day before and riveted by 4 men working a can and a hammer in the open air. When people picture the age when the skyscraper was new, this is the tower they picture, the one the ape climbed in the film. The reason is not nostalgia. It is that the building still stands exactly true. The frame doing the quiet job, the rivets clamped it to do. These were the men who put it there, the riveters and the derrick gangs and the Mohawk iron workers on the high steel. And the work still deserves the recognition their names never got. That distinction matters when considering the record. The achievement was not merely that a very tall building existed at the end. It was that the builders found a way to make the process repeatable. A single successful lift would not have been enough. The same basic sequence had to work again and again across hundreds of connections and thousands of pieces. The system had to survive changing heights, changing weather, changing crews, and the accumulating complexity of a structure that was becoming larger every day. Not a race to the sky, not one man's monument to himself, but the most precisely organized construction site the world had yet built.